welcome Adiza Tajani.
Good afternoon and welcome to the FinTech Hub session. This is the last session of a series of sessions that we've had this week. On Monday, we focused on Canada. On Tuesday, we had the session which was focused on EMEA, on APAC, and then Wednesday, we had the session focused on EMEA. And today, last but not least, we have the Americas. So thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us. So please, can I introduce our panelists?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mike Siegel. I am a partner at 500 FinTech, which is an early-stage venture capital fund based in Silicon Valley, but we invest globally, and I'm representing Silicon Valley.
Sunny?
Thanks. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sunny Parikh. I'm here from the Partnership Fund for New York City. We're a $150 million VC fund focused on investing in New York City companies. It was founded by Henry Kravis about 20 years ago. And one of the initiatives that the fund has started in partnership with Accenture is the FinTech Innovation Lab. So I look forward to sharing more about that today in our discussion.
Good afternoon. I'm Jorge Ortiz, founding president of FinTech Mexico. We are a non-for-profit organization created to structure the FinTech market in the country.
Hi, everyone. I'm Bruno Diniz from the Brazilian Startup Association at the FinTech Committee, and I'm here representing Brazil. We also are a non-profit organization as well.
So the way that we're going to do this today is that we're going to have a quick discussion with us as a panelists, and then we'll open up for questions. I am from London, so I technically will make sure I put in some London bits in there as well. So, would you like to start? Tell us a bit more about your hub and what you've been up to over the last few years.
Sure. The Brazilian hub is pretty new. The activity in Brazil, I think it started back in 2014, at the middle of 2014, and increased a lot. We have now about 240 different fintechs in the country. And pretty much 60% of them were created in the last 2 and 3 years. So it's a pretty recent market. We're doing very well in initiatives at payments, the payments space, and a lot of corporate collaborations are happening as well. So it's a pretty interesting space. Along with Mexico, we are the top 2 countries in the region that are doing well in FinTech. We have 240. Mexico got something almost like that, numbers of initiatives. And we got a huge gap on financial inclusion. I think it's a common problem in Latin America. So in Brazil, it's a very challenging topic, and we got a lot of things to do in this space as well.
And in the next 5 years, where do you see your hub going?
Well, I think 5 years is a little bit too much when you think about the pace of things, how things are going. But I think in the next 1 year and a half, 2 years, we're going to start regulating the space. I think it's something that there are some old regulations, especially towards online lending. We got something that is going on by the central bank, the regulation. And after we got the space regulation and the uncertainties for the participants in this market start to slow down, I think it's going to be better because we're going to have, they can work with more certainty about the regulatory environment. So.
Great, thanks. And in your hub?
Well, FinTech in Mexico is, as I mentioned, is an organization. It's a non-for-profit organization created in 2015, a little bit over 2 years. It was created when we saw how the ecosystem, the FinTech ecosystem, was evolving in Mexico. So we gathered all the most of the entrepreneurs in the country just to create this association. So it's an association created by the entrepreneurs to look for common goals. So we created, in numbers, we're, as Dino just mentioned, we're almost the same as in Brazil, around 240 initiatives, FinTech initiatives, in all the stages, from incubation to quite large companies or medium-sized FinTech companies. Also, one of the problems in Mexico is financial inclusion. It's sad to say this, but I say it with a smile. We are the second lowest country in Latin America regarding financial inclusion. So the average in Latin America is 51% of adults. We have around 40%. So there is a lot of need to go into those places. 2 years ago, we created FinTech Mexico, and we work in 5 committees. So we work in regulation, education, cybersecurity, research, research, and what's the other one? Technology. We are growing, and one of the main achievements is that last week, the president of Mexico presented to the Congress the FinTech law. So we were the organization who asked for that law, and we have been working with the government for 2 years now. And so now we have the law in the Congress. We have to work towards approving the law, but Mexico is going forward.
Great, we can talk a bit more about that later. Sunny, what's going on in New York?
Sure. So New York, compared to Brazil and Mexico, has been a little more developed, given it's been the concentration of financial institutions there, and the lab that we started in 2010, a few years after the financial crisis. It was started with the goal of bringing the financial institutions and the startup ecosystem together. If you're an enterprise tech entrepreneur, one of the toughest things you have, fundraising is tough, but the toughest part is really navigating large financial institutions as customers and understanding what your product is meant to do, what the feedback is. If you want to talk to the head of compliance or the head of data and understand where your technology can fit in there, it takes a long time. And our goal when we started the lab with 10 financial institutions was to shorten that time from 18 months to maybe a few months, and really kind of help fast track that product development process and help those companies scale. And the progress we've made has been pretty strong, and we look forward to continue making that. We started with 10 financial institutions in 2010. We have 40 financial institutions now. We've had 47 companies go through the lab. Companies have raised over $500 million since they've graduated. Companies like Digital Asset, Digital Reasoning, Enigma, Casisto, and CB Insights, which a lot of you probably read to understand the FinTech ecosystem. So it's been great, and I think one of the new things you talked about the next 5 years, as we look at the hub in New York, we have a strong concentration of financial institutions. We've increasingly seen insurance companies come to the table more. So today, actually, we launched an insurance tech track as part of the FinTech Innovation Lab, because I think we're seeing more and more entrepreneurs build insurance-specific solutions and insurance companies looking to do that. We've seen regulators engage more, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as well. So I think in the next couple of years, you'll see collaboration across a few different parties and across a few different hubs, which is exciting for us.
And Mike, in San Francisco and Silicon Valley?
Yeah, so we're generally, Silicon Valley, we're a bit hard-pressed to call ourselves a FinTech hub, right? We've got 80 years of experience in scaling innovation. And I think in terms of the financial services space, we tend a little bit towards more consumer-oriented or infrastructure-oriented as opposed to enterprise-oriented. That said, my organization, 500 Startups, has been investing in FinTech. Part of our founders come out of the PayPal mafia, so we've been the most active early-stage FinTech investor in the world since 2012. We've got about 225 portfolio companies in 26 countries. On the back of that, what we've done with 500 Startups is recognize that an awful lot of institutions like yours both have facilities in Silicon Valley and continue to come to Silicon Valley as a place to learn how is the process of innovation done. And so what we've done at 500 is to try and engage more banks and insurers. We have about 60, 65 today, where we're trying to connect them up, not just with our portfolio companies, but all the richness that Silicon Valley has, not to stay there, but rather to bring back to wherever they're from.
And should I ask about the next 5 years, considering you've got an 80-year track record of innovation there?
Well, I guess what I would say philosophically is that we think that transformation of financial services today is where, say, media or retail was in the early 90s. And so we're just at the beginning of what is going to be an increasingly steep ramp of change. And we do think that's not just a Silicon Valley thing, that's a global thing.
Right. So one of the key things when it comes to FinTech hubs is about collaboration and partnerships and moving past the MOUs and the hype and the marketing and to the tangible things that are happening. So it'd be great to get your points of view on the actual examples of partnerships and collaborations that you think have been key in your regions.
Yeah, in fact, there's one that was launched this year called Alianza Iberoamericana. It's like an alliance of the countries from Spain, Portugal, and some countries from Latin America. So we are collaborating in a way to come together as a bloc and try to benchmark the different regulatory aspects we have in the region. Because we have some common issues, right? We have just like the financial inclusion is a very common issue of all of the countries. And we can share a lot of experience and best practices on that. I think we're doing well. We just collaborate with on equity crowdfunding, right? Mm-hmm. Jorge can say a little bit more about.
Yeah, that is a good example of collaboration because we are really doing things like FinTech Iberoamerica was launched in May in Montevideo, Uruguay, and it comprehends 20 countries. But in the launch, we brought some, for instance, regulators from our country, so we kind of sat them together to start talking about how can they make kind of take the same spirit into the laws of each country, so that it will be easier, for instance, for a Colombian company, if they're operating in crowdfunding in Colombia and then they want to go to Chile or to Mexico, just to be really easy for them to open a crowdfunding company in those other countries, since the law should be the same or almost the same, with perhaps some different aspects, but the spirit is interesting what they're taking. So they are really collaborating. They got together now at the beginning of October again in Dominican Republic to continue those talks. So there is a good example of collaboration between the region, right? The Latin region or the Hispanic region.
Sunny?
Sure. Collaboration, obviously, there's a lot of conversation about how that's done. It's a few different levels. In New York, at our hub, in our lab, getting 40 financial institutions together to work with 8 companies every year, that alone, it's a strong statement of how interested the financial institutions are in making that happen and working towards a goal of building out the FinTech sector in New York City. From a tactical perspective, I'll just walk through kind of how that works in New York. In our lab, we have about 8 to 10 companies every year. And the financial institutions that are part of the lab, we have sponsorship from kind of the CTOs, CIOs, and their teams to work with these companies. And what that work entails specifically is over the course of 3 months, these companies get to navigate these organizations, meet the relevant people, understand the needs of that organization from a procurement perspective, from a security perspective, compliance perspective. It's the appreciation, and Mike will talk a little bit about some of the empathy we were talking about earlier, is having a perspective of how the financial institutions' lens are, and it also allows the financial institutions to then think about what is the startup perspective, how do you think about innovation, and how these companies think. So that collaboration as part of the lab is an ability for both sides to work together, and what the companies get out of it as part of that collaboration is really an understanding of what is, you go into building out a company in the enterprise space with a problem you're trying to solve, but as you get into that organization, you realize that's not the most important problem, or that's not a real problem, but their technology can solve X problem. And we've had companies in the lab that go in saying they're going to solve this problem, and after a few meetings, they realize that this technology can be used to solve a totally different problem, and that's heightened their profile of the product and the revenue they can generate. So that collaboration has been great to see over the years, and we've had companies successfully change what their product that they're building as a result of it. The lab has also been a great way for companies that are building products in other sectors like healthcare and defense to really understand the use cases in financial services and navigate that. So that kind of collaboration has been pretty powerful. And then across hubs, we've had companies in the lab that have come through. We had a company from Sweden last year called Behaviosec that used the lab as a way to navigate the US market. We've had companies from California that are more consumer-facing but have looked at ways to work with enterprises, and so the lab has been a good way to do that as well. And then the last part of collaboration I'll talk about is, I mentioned earlier, we've seen regulators become more and more interested in working with companies, so having those pieces sit together, having the regulators open up offices in New York, have office hours, and help them think through the regulatory perspective has been helpful, and I think will prove very successful in the next couple of years.
That's great.
Mike?
Yeah, so as an early stage investor, we're often thinking about our exits. And when we think about our exits, we think about the fact that most fintech companies that we invest in are not going to get to exit without relationships with the existing financial services industry. The challenge that we see in that is that they operate at two different frequencies, right? Folks in this room, you operate, generally speaking, very slowly with a lot of leverage. And the startups operate very quickly with very little leverage. And we look at one of our roles as trying to create a gear shift. So the way that we do that on the startup side is we teach them what we refer to as incumbent empathy. So how do organizations like yours work? What does it mean to have to navigate this giant org chart? How do you deal with the fact that a decision may not come for 18 months, and is there some way you can hack that process? And I'll come back to a specific example in a moment. On the incumbent side, we have a series of programs in addition to, we introduce you to our companies that we refer to as startup empathy. So we try and provide executive education, including all the way down in the managerial level, in how do startups work, how does the venture ecosystem work, how, most importantly, has the venture ecosystem over 80 years figured out how to manage the risk of the issue where only about 1% of all investments turn into some kind of material success. So we do education programs with our partners. One example of a company that we navigated this with is currently in our accelerator, where they provide a data compliance tool based on blockchain. Now, to get into your data compliance infrastructure is at best an 18-month cycle. So what we did was we worked with them to define a product which was a non-invasive compliance X-ray of data, something that would be very easy for a chief data compliance officer to contemplate buying on a credit card instantly. We then encouraged them to go out via LinkedIn and just try and reach data compliance officers. They found out that, in fact, chief data compliance officers are often the loneliest people inside of your institutions. And when they started sending emails to these folks on LinkedIn, blind emails, they got a 60% hit rate for folks who would like to talk to them about what would a magic wand look like, which all of a sudden got them into these very interesting conversations. So we don't have results that we can disclose about that, but that changed, right, the dynamic from an 18-month opposite sides of a table to a couple of months collaborating on the development of a solution. And we really like to see that, both because it helps our companies get to revenue much faster, but because it also helps change the culture of our partners such that they're going to be better able to deal with the increasing pace of change in our industry.
So,
sorry, long-winded.
Thanks, Mike. So when it comes to the support, so you've all sort of touched upon different types of support. Some of you are non-profit, some of you are private sector. How has the public sector and the private sector actually supported your hubs? Or have they not, and you've just gone and done it all on your own? It would be great to get those insights, because in London, there was a mix of everybody doing it and actually putting money down, which actually allowed companies to take some risk, big companies and small companies, which helped move the ecosystem forward over the last few years. Who wants to start?
Well, I believe that in Brazilian Startup Association, we help promoting the space, helping also connecting and just making the corporate understand a little bit more about how a startup works, how is the life of a startup. But I think from the governmental sector, we don't have this kind of support. I think that we got the regulator, but they are regulating the spaces. It's not that kind of support. We got the central bank that is doing a hub and a lab to start this collaboration and start approaching the fintech startups in Brazil. But by now, I think that pretty much the works of the Brazilian Startups Association, for example, in the fintech sector, is a non-profit organization. We're trying really to do it our own, and we've been quite successful because we've been around since 2011, and with some interesting results on that, on fostering this kind of understanding of the sector.
Sunny?
Yeah, sure. So in New York, it's a unique place for fintech because we have, as I mentioned earlier, such a high concentration of financial institutions. And so the ecosystem and kind of the fintech sector there has grown organically as a result of the need for innovation from large financial services companies. And business models, as a result, have grown out of people that have come out of large financial service firms realizing an issue, building out a fintech company. So there hasn't been as much of a public-private partnership or a need for it in New York City, but you've seen kind of internal large organizations build out, like Barclays has built out Barclays Rise, Deutsche Bank Labs. All the large organizations, large financial institutions have built out internal arms of innovation in some way, shape, or form, which is a lot different than when we started in 2010, when kind of the CTO was the one in charge of innovation, and now you've seen more and more of an appreciation for the sector, and so that's naturally kind of grown, but it's grown more in a very commercial, with a scalable business model in mind.
Mike?
I don't think that highly of the U.S. public sector.
It's the California view.
The California perspective?
Well, it seems to be the global view right now.
We're not talking politics today.
Yeah, that's right. Sorry. So relative to Silicon Valley, the regulators, to the degree they're able to get involved and talk to the companies and try and understand, and I give them credit for at least trying, but we have so many regulators in the US, I'm not going to say that there's anything consistent. What I will note, though, is two things which I find interesting. The first one being, we've actually seen a fair number of startups started by former regulators going into RegTech. And by the way, I just love those entrepreneurs because they know what's going on. The second thing is, as we go reach out around the world, regulators elsewhere, take MAS or the FCA, have been a real partner to us in trying to get us involved with their local companies because, again, we invest globally. And it's truly refreshing to see often the regulator be one of the most forward-acting participants in the economy in terms of helping this innovation along.
In defense of the regulators, I think we've seen the regulators engage more, and it's it's a very complicated system here in the U.S. So I think in the next few years you'll see. We hosted an event last month, as I alluded to earlier, with the OCC, the CFPB, and the Fed, and the level of engagement and the openness that you're seeing with them and the startup ecosystem is pretty impressive. And I think we talk about empathy. There needs to be probably some level of regulator empathy because it's a very complicated structure that they're living under as well, too.
So. Sure.
In Mexico, the regulators, I think, is a great example because 2 years ago, nobody really knew about fintech. So we approached the Ministry of Finance asking for the fintech law, and they were complete open to listen to us. In fact, they just told us in 5 minutes, okay, you tell me what to do. So for us, and it was really like in 5 minutes. So we have been working with them, with the Minister of Finance, the National Banking and Securities Commission, and the Bank of Mexico, Central Bank, in order to create this law, I will say, together. And now, as I mentioned at the beginning, now it's in the Congress, so it was presented by the President last week. Now we have to work with the Bank of Mexico and the Banking Commission to establish the secondary law. And we have already started doing that. For instance, one of the aspects of the law is to have an open banking standard and to open APIs for all financial institutions, including traditional financial institutions and fintechs. So we're already working by bringing to Mexico experts from other parts of the world to advise the government on how they should do it. But they are really, really open to work together with entrepreneurs. So In Mexico, there is a really traditional country in which, just to get into the national palace, you couldn't. No, and now they invite us any other week. We talk really nice. So I think it's a great example.
And do you think that you're using, like in that example you talked about open banking, and that's the area that my company works in heavily. Are you looking at what's happening in Europe to help feed into, so PSD2 is quite a hot topic, and open banking, open APIs. So are you looking at that sort of stuff in Mexico and taking learnings?
Actually, in September, we brought, unfortunately, it was the same week of the earthquake, so donate, please. I'm from Mexico, so it's a great campaign done by InnoTribe. So we brought some experts from the Open Data Institute from London that they established the open banking standard. So we're going to continue working together with them just to hear their experience. And also we brought the guy that on March we made an event about collaboration. We brought some entrepreneurs, and we are helping one of them. He's from a British company to open an office and establish operations in Mexico. But he has also been in 2 cohorts of the regulatory sandbox in the UK.
Oh.
So he's also providing that experience because we are going to have also a regulatory sandbox. So there is, it's kind of, to say, crowdsourcing for all over the world, where we are taking examples and then just to apply it on how our legal system works, our ecosystem works, and so forth.
One thing that's kind of key when it comes to having an active FinTech hub is talent. You need people who understand what's going on and that can be decision makers in these companies. So it would be great to get each of your perspective on what the talent pain points are, and also where you've seen your hub be very successful when it comes to where does the talent come from? Can any of the bankers sitting in this room be a protection FinTech founder? In London, that is what we found, that the average FinTech founder actually has about 10 to 15 years worth of experience in their specific domain, and then they actually come to help solve the problem or build a team around that as well. So there's lots of strong domain knowledge. So who wants to start?
Yeah, that's kind of profile in Brazil as well. In São Paulo, for example, is the major city we got there with all the financial activity going there. We have the examples of many guys leaving the jobs in the banks, either because of the recession, because of the crisis, or either because they really are going to want to catch this FinTech moment that we're having, and starting their own companies. I think it's also a good time, because in Brazil right now we're having many different corporate programs, acceleration programs by different financial institutions that can help those entrepreneurs as well in these early days. So this is happening a lot, and the average is just like that. The guys are in their 40s, the guys that really understand very well some kind of subject or some kind of challenge inside their financial institutions, and they really come and try to pitch new stuff, new projects, not only the conventional ones, but some ones that are really important inside the organization, inside banks, something that can be resolved.
In New York, if you think about all the financial institutions there, the entrepreneurs that are innovating in FinTech have come with deep domain expertise, have been in compliance or in security at large institutions, understanding the nuances. So you have strong domain experts as founders. And as you scale, there's a few programs at NYU, Columbia that are helping build some knowledge base and thought leadership around that. So that's been really great. I think anytime when you try to really scale in a specific sector in technology, there's always the challenge of finding the right technical talent, and I'm sure that's the challenge for a lot of the hubs. So it's just a matter of supply meeting demand, and I think it's slowly happening. But quality tech talent at the right price is always a challenge, if you ask any founders. So,
Mike, talent in San Francisco? I hear it's hot.
We don't have a problem with quality tech talent. The right price is impossible. Since some Google engineers make more than I'm sure many of the people in this room. It's a little ridiculous. Which is one of the reasons that sort of we advocate often that you should take advantage of the network and the investors in Silicon Valley if you're building a firm wherever you are, but then stay near your customers and where you don't have to fight Google and Twitter for talent.
Come to New York.
Come to New York, Brazil,
Come to Mexico. Yeah.
Awesome. And we've invested in, all your hubs.
Nice.
But one of the things we are trying to do is, I mentioned the education that we do with corporates. Sometimes that will inspire a corporate executive to say, all right, I'm done with my corporate life. I'm ready to try something. We love that because we find that if you have the entrepreneurial spark, the skill set is a trainable thing. Secondly, we do work with a number of universities to try and show the path of entrepreneurship. We work with Stanford, we work with Berkeley, we work with INSEAD, a couple of others that we'll announce in the coming months to try and identify early talent and inspire them towards an entrepreneurial path.
Great. One of the things that's really important for a hub to grow and be successful is long-term investment. So when it comes to the investment climate within your hubs, how is it looking? London still sits as the top investment hub in Europe for now. And hopefully that will continue. And actually, London and Partners made an announcement today about how FinTech is still booming when it comes to investment in London. So how is the investment climate for you all when it comes to FinTech? As investors?
Frothy.
Meaning?
Well, there are some, and I'm sure we all know them. There are folks who have been investing in FinTech for a long time and understand the rigors and understand what it takes to grow a FinTech company that others don't. And then there's a lot of other venture money out there that really doesn't understand, and it ultimately bids up the prices for the good FinTech companies. And as an investor, I'd rather buy cheap, frankly.
Yeah, I mean, in New York, we talk more about kind of the hubs and regions. FinTech in New York, from a VC funding perspective, has grown steadily, and we haven't gotten quite there yet. We're pretty close to the 80-year track record that you guys have built out there. And so, if you look at Silicon Valley and New York, they're neck and neck as of last year in terms of FinTech investments. In the West Coast, it ends up being a little bit more consumer and infrastructure, while, as Mike mentioned, in New York, it's a little bit more enterprise. So the type of entrepreneurs, the type of companies, and type of valuations vary slightly. We'd like to think on the enterprise side, they tend to be a little bit more reasonable from the investment perspective. So.
Well, in Brazil, sorry, you can go.
Well, in Mexico, the VC industry is growing itself. So there has been quite support from the government to create new VC funds. So we have seen an increase on fund managers just raising capital. And I would say that perhaps the largest portion of investments from those new VC funds is going into FinTech. So they're really supporting the ecosystem. I mean, it's not such a large number, but last year we ended up with over 100 million invested by VC funds, Mexican VC funds, into the FinTech sector in Mexico. And we expect this year to be larger and also to attract foreign capital to be invested into the FinTech sector. So the VC industry is growing, and FinTech is positioned as the selected or the preferred sector to invest.
Well, according to a report by Innovate Finance in February, Brazil attracted in 2015 around $87 million in venture capital investment. And then the next year, 2016, we got 162 million invested in the FinTech sector in Brazil. So we almost doubled, and we got in the top 10 in terms of investment when you think in this list put by Innovate Finance. So there are three interesting cases in Brazil that attracted a lot of attention from the VCs, which is Nubank, which is basically a credit card that you can manage, all managed by the cell phone, and now they're going to the current accounts. We also got Creditas, which is a company focused on loans and online lending, and Guia Bolso, another company that raised 125 million reais, Brazilian reais, yesterday. So, which is a company, a PFM kind of tool. They also offer loans. So it's increasing. I think it's catching the attention of many VCs locally and internationally.
I think that point about the money being global, so you all have people from all over the world investing in your hubs, it really shows that the fintech sector is global and the money that's being invested is global. Sure. If you look at one of the biggest funds at the moment, SoftBank, they seem to be leading many of the technology deals, and I can't wait for their fintech deals.
I don't remember the last numbers. Maybe you do, but all of us were being overshadowed by China.
Yes, we definitely had the investment conversation on the APAC channel.
But the next frontier is Latin America. Less than us.
We're making investments there, man. We are taking Chinese money to do it, but
a global investment environment is very good. So I think one of the key things, it's great to talk about the good things, but it's also important to talk about the harder things. So the challenges, when it comes to the real challenges in your hubs, what would you all say are the top 2 challenges impacting your hub today?
cost of engineers.
Engineering costs, okay.
And innovation tourists.
Yes. We've had many conversations about innovation tourism, haven't we, Mike?
Yeah.
So innovation tourism is when senior execs from X company would like to come to the startup petting zoo and just see startups, to see what they look like, what they talk like, how they dress, etc. But they don't necessarily want to do any business with them. And doing business is exactly what a startup is about. So
I will point out, I want to expand on that just slightly. The real challenge that we see with that, aside from the startups having some of their time wasted, is large companies who engage in that don't recognize the degree to which they dilute their own brand, because startups and VCs talk to each other. And when there's this ongoing train of executives who are generally well-meaning and they're trying to study, but they come in and they waste the startup's time or the investor's time, then the next startup or the next VC doesn't want to allow their company to engage with that corporate. And that creates blockages that I think we all want to see not exist.
Yeah, challenges within a hub. I think we talked about it a little bit earlier. There's always a need. We have companies in our lab that have grown, and part of growing is hiring the right people. And I think that becomes a challenge regardless of what hub you're in. And I think that's being solved slowly in various regions, and with universities building out programs, with the right kind of training happening to solve that. And then the other thing, obviously, putting on the enterprise hat, the time it takes for a startup to kind of engage with a large financial institution and get to a signed contract is probably still longer than we'd want it to be. Sure. And so part of the lab is to kind of shorten that process. And how short can you get it? That's a question that Mike and I were talking about. I think, typically it's been 18 months or longer. And I think with the lab and some of the other initiatives that various organizations have started, you've gotten down to a few months. Now, can you get that even shorter? I don't know. That's a question we'll have to find out in the next couple of years. Challenges your side?
Yeah, in Mexico, we are addressing 2 things. First, about talent. The demand of programmers has been so up that the salaries they have gotten up, not in the size of Silicon Valley, but they are raising. So that's a barrier for the entrepreneurs, that when you need to hire some more programmers, you have to pay them a lot. So sometimes now they are also earning more than some bankers. So in this kind of economy in Mexico, so it will be really difficult for entrepreneurs to address that. So what we are creating is kind of a FinTech school, coding school, so that, just to teach them and to get them employment within financial institutions that they are also demanding this, but fintechs, or that they can start their own projects. And this is with an aim of social impact, because there is a lot of young population in Mexico. The average age in Mexico is 28 years old, so we are a very young country. But a lot of these young guys, they don't have a future. They won't go to college because they have to work since a very young age to provide to their houses. So perhaps by teaching them how to code in kind of 6 months or so, we can just get them on a starting level in some institutions.
Right.
So we're already working in that. So hopefully we'll have our first class this year. And the other challenge is then for the FinTech to really deliver what they are promising. So they are growing. Now we'll have the FinTech law, which will give you more, let's say, certainty. But now we'll have to see the next step for the FinTechs to deliver what they are promising, if they can address financial inclusion, if they can address access to credit, and just to move Mexico into a digital economy.
And Brazil?
Well, I would add that the regulatory challenges that we have. So for some space, such as the online lending space in Brazil, we need to regulate the space in order for the entrepreneurs to work with a certain degree of certainty, because right now they act as a correspondent bank, for example. So they need to have a financial institution beside that, and it's going to change soon. And I think in a certain degree, limited exit opportunities in Brazil would also, I would point that. So I think these two, along with other things, that the innovation tourism, lack of talent, I think something that is another challenge that we have here.
Okay, great. So that brings us to the end of our discussion. And so a warm thanks to our panelists. And now we open up for Q&A. So the way this will work is that we have 3 amazing ladies who are our runners today. So when you have a question, please stand up, say where you're from, and then ask your question.
Thanks. My name is Jay, and I'm from Switzerland. And my question is to Mike. You said you are from the PayPal mafia, right?
I am not.
Your company is, yeah.
But some of our founders.
I would like to have an honest answer from, I don't care, from you, Mike, where you think the future is going, because I see the gap between the finance institutes and the fintechs and startups. It's not coming together, it's going far away. Will there be like a UBO for finance, which will in one way fight against the regulatory and win a large part of the market? Because if you look at UBO, for example, it's fighting against regulatory issues, and it's on one way winning because the valuation of the company is not from this world. Will this happen for the finance, in your opinion? Because I think if it will come from value or something from Europe, from UK.
Look, if you look at how technology has changed every industry up until now, right? If you were to look at the top revenue earners in media, in telecom, in travel, in retail, the winners today are different than the winners for 20 years ago. And the winners are those companies that have embraced digital technologies, right? So if you were to look at media, the number 1 is Google by a long shot. But after that is Disney, and then Fox, and then someone else, I can't recall who, Comcast maybe, and then Facebook. So I very much think that the future of financial services will be the same, that there will be some new entrants who change the way that things are done, and whether they're challenging regulation, going along with regulation, that's a very short-term issue, in my belief. And that instead, there will also be some current incumbents who embrace the opportunity of technology, right? Look at Goldman going into consumer lending, right? So that is where you've got an incumbent that is crossing, lines of traditional sector focus. You'll also have, right, Orange just took a banking license in Africa, right? So it's those companies, incumbent or new entrant, who embrace the technology and push or follow closely behind the regulatory change, which needs to be there, both the change and the regulation, because you have to still keep the citizens' money safe. But the regulations that were built for a world 30 years ago are not relevant or not as relevant, right, today.
I mean, I'll add on to that. I think the safety and the regulatory environment it's different when you compare Uber to a financial service firm. If you order an Uber and your ride fails, you're just going to call another one. If you put in a trade and it doesn't go through, it really affects your financial wealth and your health. Right? That's something that you wouldn't accept on a day-to-day basis if something happened with your cash. There's a few core sectors like healthcare and financial services where regulation is something that you need to collaborate with. At least that's our view. It's not something that you can break because there's a lot of people, interconnected parties that are depending on that. So.
Sorry, can you give him back?
The biggest issue we have with Uber in Europe is the issue of insurance. They are not drivers, they have no license. That means you are talking about the lives of the people who are driving in Uber. And that's for me more worth than money, to be honest.
The public, right, and U.S. Transportation regulator did not come down on Uber. It was it was people who stood to lose money, not lives.
Yeah, exactly. And if, for example, UK, they are changing the regulatory. It's very easy in UK to build up a new bank, to get a license for a bank.
It's easier, but it wasn't always like that way.
No, it wasn't always, but they are changing. I mean, UK is changing. Switzerland is thinking about, perhaps in 5 years, I don't know.
Well, right, so Switzerland just gave clear guidance around ICOs,
exactly,
right? So.
Sure.
Next question.
Kind of related. Thanks. So
welcome back, Sophie.
Hello. Sorry, can't keep my mouth shut.
We don't want you to.
Yes.
Sophie was on the APAC panel earlier on in the week.
Yes. So I'm both Nordic hubs and I'm also a blockchain-based FinTech. So there's a bit of both. So moving on from the theme of the Uber regulation, obviously you mentioned ICOs, and we've seen a variety of approaches to regulation of borderless currencies, cryptocurrencies. And we're seeing some interesting developments in the US in terms of, I guess, intentions to regulate. But obviously with a lot of different regimes and a lot of different political tensions and the fact that these things are borderless, where do you think that's likely to go in the US?
So the real answer is I don't know, but again, I'll go back to historical observation to say this thing that we call an ICO or these things that we call cryptocurrencies, they're just another tool. And I think everyone's trying to figure out what is that tool good for, and then how should it be made part of the overall structure of how money moves. So, my personal belief is that much like in 2000 with stocks, right, the ICO bubble is going to burst, and then there's going to be a flight to quality, and quality in that instance means that companies which have natural network effects, right, are going to be able to use that tool as an alternative for capital formation, and that they're going to come under the same kind of regulatory strictures for the protection of investors that any other initial offering does or qualified offering does or whatever. That's my belief. Nothing to add?
Nothing to add, sorry?
I don't know where the ICO future is. I would be making a lot of money if I knew where that was going. So.
Next question, please.
Nothing, really?
Okay. So I have a question then. So if there was something that would be on your FinTech wish list that you could make happen by the end of this year, what would it be?
For us, it's easy to get the law approved
Okay,
by
great.
the end of the year.
Yeah. We are under a public consultation right now in Brazil about one part of the law. Your law, I think it covers many different subsectors in the fintech space. Right now, we're dealing specifically about online lending. So I hope that it goes well and the regulator listen to all the opinions of the entrepreneurs.
It's easy. Take our law, copy paste, Google Translate, and then you have the Portuguese.
that's the thing. That's the thing. That's
use
why
technology.
That's why we with this alliance thing. So it's to share best practice and really try to improve the whole ecosystem.
Wish list for the end of the year?
So I said before, we try and teach incumbent empathy and we try and teach startup empathy. I would love more people from this room to get involved with our startups, advising, giving feedback, right? Sometimes I imagine you undervalue your own expertise delivered in the right way to a startup to help guide them. I think Sunny's program does an amazing job of channeling some of that guidance, and I would encourage all of you to get involved with any hub or investor organization you can find and bring some of the wealth of your experience to startups.
Sunny?
Yeah, I'll second what Mike said, especially since he said such good things about our program. I'll actually phrase that with a slight question. You know, one of the things we've been looking at is things around regulatory sandboxes. I know in London there's been some success around it. Can you talk about kind of the practical outcomes of that and how that's worked there?
So in London, there's been the FCA has had the FinTech Sandbox program, and so I think they're into their second batch. I think one of the challenges that a regulator has is that sometimes when they get their, once they kick these programs off, as there isn't enough regulatory talent and compliance talent in London, that talent then gets poached by the startups. And so there is this almost cat and mouse thing going on where the Bank of England also has a FinTech program that they have rolled out, and they've got great talent running that. So I think it's going to become more and more important to make sure that regulators invest in their FinTech programs for the long term and also encourage their talent to stay for the long term, because I think one of the things that have been great about your program is that the team that have been running it over the course of 7 years. So they understand the challenges of what happens and how to actually enable that knowledge transfer as the program grows and develops. So I think that the knowledge transfer within these regulatory programs is really important, and making sure that the right talent stays to see the course through when it comes to being part of these programs.
How can we help you guys?
Invest in the company. Keep investing.
How can we help you?
Right, I think that brings us to the end of our session. So thank you very much to all of you for taking part. So the next session that's going to take place in here is actually about cybersecurity and the last 12 months, and that will be happening at 2 o'clock. As we all know, cybersecurity is a very hot topic at the moment across our industry and across many other industries, so please do join us for that session. So as was mentioned during our session, across the week, InnoTribe has been supporting the appeal and campaign for the Mexican earthquake. There have been a number of natural disasters around the world, and so this week we are supporting the one in Mexico. And the earthquake was really devastating, and they need as much support as possible. So when you do go out to get your coffee, there's a little box at the end, and you can put some change in there, or some notes. Notes will do too. And Swift will match all donations made across the week. So thank you very much for taking the time to join us for the FinTech Hubs.